Alright, boys and girls, I don't have much time and I have a minor headache, so we're going to get right into this video. Today we're talking about the European fallow deer, scientifically known as Dama Dama. There's that term again. It could possibly mean punishment, self-control, or subduing in Sanskrit. However, that makes no sense. It's a deer. Maybe it's a submissive deer. Maybe it's breedable. Who knows? Can I say that in the first 30 seconds? Probably shouldn't. But I'm going to leave it in because, like I said, headache. So it's one of the two living fallow deer species, the European, which is in the game, and the other is the Persian. I'm sure you can figure out where they live. Fallow actually means to be left alone. It is actually an agricultural term that usually would be used when it comes to the fields, fallowed ground, till it and leave it alone for a while. So, speaking of grounds, what we're doing with the exhibit is we're going to do something very simple. It's going to be a somewhat forested, somewhat open area with a small creek going through the middle. Nothing fancy, but seeing how I keep thinking of my horrible attempt in the American Bison exhibit, I have learned quite a bit when it comes to how to make environments look better, so go ahead and watch that if you want to learn more. There's not much to really talk about in that aspect, so we're going to keep on with the animal. Coming at roughly 33 to 37 inches at the shoulder for males and 30 to 33 for females, the fallow deer is ever so slightly smaller than the white-tailed deer, as the males can weigh anywhere from 130 to 220 pounds, where the white-tailed deer sort of averages at 200 pounds and can reach roughly 260 on a good day. Obviously, they have the noted antlers that all deer do. However, the different patterns are the main distinctive way you can tell deer apart. For instance, with the fallow deer, they have what are considered webbed antlers. That doesn't mean there's webbing between them, but it looks like there are points that are somewhat connected by a web, giving it somewhat of a shovel appearance and, quite honestly, a very unique look for us North Americans. When it comes to their coat, there's four major types. The one that we know the best, being the very deep imprints, is going to be known as the common coat, with the chestnut and light spotlets. The metal is actually more distinct spots, so instead of it looking kind of like there's white spots, they're going to be very, very distinct, and you'll definitely notice. The melanistic, which is not solely something that the fallow deer has. Melanism is something that all animals have. However, the melanistic just means it is going to be a darker black color. And the other one is leucistic. Now, you may know albino as being all white, complete head to toe. Leucistic is not quite albinism. It is still very light, mostly white, but it is not an absolute lack of melanin. We're running through this fast, so I hope you're paying attention because I'm on a time limit here. So, the first deer species that we have covered in this series, I am going to do a little bit of a rundown on where they come from. Way back 20 million years ago in Eurasia, animals like that of Heteroprox and Dicroceras were the original deer species to have split antlers. Before them, most of them just had little nubs up top like that of yearling deer. However, at these two species, they finally branched and had two prongs. I know, quite an achievement. But that would then lead further down the line, roughly 3 million years ago, where the species that would eventually turn into the red deer, the axis deer, and today's fallow deer. Now, roughly speaking, we aren't 100% sure where the fallow deer first originates from. The common consensus is Anatolia, aka Turkey, and possibly the Balkans. Yes, the Balkans. Now, we do know for a fact that by 120,000 BC, the European fallow deer were distributed all the way from Anatolia up into the British Isles. Many things allowed them to cross into such areas like the what is now sunken Doggerland, and also other land bridges between places like Denmark and Norway due to the massive glaciation at the time. However, climate changes from 115,000 to 11,700 BC pretty much forced the species to return to the homeland. The major change of that would be the overglaciation, pretty much destroying most of the herbivorous animals' diet and forcing them back to the somewhat warmer climates so that they could actually eat. Now, since the end of the last glacial period, they had eventually returned all over Europe. One of the big reasons for that is human involvement, and we will get into that just a little bit further down this video. Now, when it comes to the cultural influence, they have been associated with the Greek goddess Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and archers in general, which is a very important note, seeing how that is probably the biggest cultural aspect of the fallow deer. And as much as I said it's going to be later down the line, it's going to be right about now. The hunting of the fallow deer has been such a massive point in their cultural impact that it's almost all of it. For instance, they were a massive status symbol during the medieval era and were constantly brought all across Europe for the rich and nobles to put them in their little game lands and their parks so that they could hunt them. Obviously, only the nobles could hunt them, unless you found one in the wild. Good luck with that one, since they were mostly, held in government land. So, oh well. But even past that, during the era of colonialism, they were also brought around the world. In some degree, wild, feral is a more proper term. Wild means they're native, feral just means they were domesticated and kind of let go. So, there are feral populations all across the world, from Cyprus, Tunisia, Canada, the US, Peru, Seychelles, New Zealand, etc. And if you notice, a lot of those names have direct connection to Britain. And that's on purpose. See, the British really loved to show off their axis deer. It was a major symbol of royalty. And obviously, if they're gonna go colonize and conquer some random island or random part of the world that had a marginal military force compared to the absolute industrial unit that was the British Empire, they have to bring their special sparkly deer. I am fucking salty. I am so sorry. I'm not really. I love shit-talking colonialists. Anyway, so they had to bring their special little fallow deer so that they could show off how pretty their local species are, even though, bring them to America. Cool. Have you seen the elk and the pronghorn and the moose? Please. That fallow deer ain't shit. But that's beside the point. And it was to the point where it was such a status symbol that it was essentially a symbol of colonialism in many conquered lands by the British. Places like Barbuda, which is a small island down in the Caribbean. Prim, if you could please show a picture. Thank you. Now, the Barbudans, for the longest time, have also associated with colonialism up until a very specific point, and that is when the local slaves actually use said symbol as a symbol of liberation. I couldn't quite find out why they chose that symbol, but you know what? We'll let them have it. So now, instead of being a symbol of the colonialists, it is a symbol of those who wish to fight against their colonizers. Good on them, because that slave revolt really did work. It also worked with the Haitians. Shout out to, well, I doubt there's a lot of native Haitians watching this unless you fled the country already. I am so sorry. But let's talk about the hunting. As I've stated with their cultural impact, they are probably one of the most imported animals when it comes to hunting. The only exception I could think of off the top of my head is the axis deer of India. And it's kind of for the same reason. There's something about the speckles of the fallow deer and the interesting shape of the antlers that really brings hunters to the fray. And I think it also has to do with the size. Now, let me explain. While many people may assume that a hunter wants to bag the biggest, most beautiful animal, that is true to an extent. Ask anyone who has actually hunted large game like elk or buffalo or moose that the hunt is great until you gotta cut it up and drag the animal back to wherever you came from. That's where something like the fallow deer is perfect. It's a beautiful animal with a beautiful coat, very interesting set of horns, and is a large herd animal, and, as I said earlier, floats around 200 pounds, roughly the weight of a human being, and of course if you field gut it, a lot of that weight can be left for the animals. When it comes to meat, you probably have, let's be generous and say 120 pounds worth of meat. If you're someone that is an avid hunter and are used to actually going out and doing extraneous work, that's not going to kill you. You'll make it. Especially in the modern era where you have things like ATVs and carts and whatever. But yeah, that is the information I have on the axis deer. Now, you may be thinking, that was not a lot of information, and you're somewhat correct. Because this animal has kind of just been pigeonholed into a role in human society. While some of the previous animals we've spoken about, like the lynx, that had the symbolism of being able to see through lies, or the badger being somewhat of a folky spirit of the home, the fallow deer has always sat in this one corner of human culture. And that is the connection of the hunter and nature. And I believe that that is more impactful than most people may realize. Quite simply, the hunter is a very misunderstood group of people, and maybe in a video down the line I'll get into it more, but I believe there is going to be a little bit more to talk about later on. This is just a general overview of the animal itself, and quite honestly, seeing how I don't like getting too much into the very boring, here's the gestation period, here's the diet, here's where it lives, unless it's one of these other ones like the binturong, where you probably never heard of the damn thing. So, there's not much I can talk about because of its very specific role in our collective understanding. So, with that said and done, thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, please like, share, and subscribe. My next episode is actually going to be a very personal episode, and I am looking forward to it. I'm putting a lot of effort into it, comparatively speaking. And yeah, until next time, go outside, touch grass, hug your loved one, and bye-bye.